Shalom Aleichem, we're Zoichet to do Chadesh Yomeinu Kekedem. Oh Hashem, after a little break. I want to dedicate this year for the Tzlach of Ben Sion, Ben Dosa, him and his family. Refuah Shlema, Techaim, Meir Dov, Ben Yente, Miriam, Bas Leah, Bes Och Sh'ar, Choylei Yisrael. Some Shoftim, some Elul, Inyana Deyoima, we'll see how much time we have. Every year during the month of Elul, we read Parshas Shoftim. Why? Because in the Parsha, there's a directive how to merit to have abundance from Shamayim and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. How do you prepare these days of Rachamim and Slichos, Rosh Hashanah for Judgment Day? So what are the directives in this Parsha? Rolling in the snow, afflictions, sitting naked in thorns. No, it's a pasuk. V'shavtu es ha'am mishpat tzedek. If in our hearts we judge everyone mishpat tzedek, and the pasuk in Kedoshim says, "B'tzedek tishpot amitecha," judge people favorably. If we judge people favorably, we will be judged from above favorably. That's the greatest trick, the greatest secret for success during this month. V'shavtu es ha'am, how? Mishpat tzedek. Look at others with a smile. In fact, the name of the month, Elul, indicates that. The name of the month, Aleph Lamed Vav Lamel, is an acronym for another pasuk in the Torah. Vayishalu ish lere'ehu leshalom. Vav, Aleph, Lamed, and Lamed, that's Elul. Just being nice to people, smiling at people. That's the greatest secret for success. Vayishalu ish lere'ehu leshalom. That is how, Emetz Hashem, we will be successful in Judgment Day, Rosh Hashanah, and to have abundance both in Ruchnius and in Gashmius, Emetz Hashem. Why is it? Because during this month, the whole avodah is to get close to Ribono Shel Olam. And it's so pashut. Getting close to Ribono Shel Olam is loving his children and getting closer to them. That's how it works. When we do that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come close to us. There is a medrash, appears in Zohar Chadash, and other places in Midrashim. Shalu malachei hashares LaHaKadosh Baruch Hu. The angels asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu during the time of the Chuban, Ribono Shel Olam, you wrote in your Torah, V'shafach es damo v'chisahu be'afar. There's a mitzvah called Kisui Adam. When you shecht a chaya or off, you have to cover the blood. And here, shafchu damam kamayim, Jewish blood is spilled like water, and no one is covering it. And we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps his own Torah. So what's going on? You wrote in the Torah mitzvah, and you yourself don't do it. The Malachim keep asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you wrote in your Torah, you're not allowed to shech the behema and its offspring on one day. And what do they do to us? And unfortunately, it wasn't just back then, in the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Since then, it happened a few times. Abanim nishchatim, the sons are slaughtered along with their parents. How come you don't fulfill your Torah? It says in the Torah, V'tziva hakoyin upinu es habayis. When one has tzaras habayis, before the kohen comes, you got to take all the vessels out, because if the kohen comes and says that the house has tzaras, everything goes, everything becomes tameh. So take the vessels out. If the kohen will come afterwards and say it's tameh, at least your vessels are not. And here, what happened to the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Vayisrefu es beis ha'elokim v'kol klei machmadeh le'ashchis. They destroyed Beis HaMikdash along with all its vessels. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't keep his own Torah? That's the question the Malachei Hashares asked the Ribono Shel Olam. Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds to the Malachim and says, Klum yesh shalom ba'olam. Is there peace in the world? Hoyil ve'en shalom, ein klum. If there is no peace, there is nothing. Where is this alluded to in the Torah? There's nothing that's not alluded to in the Torah. It's a pasuk in our pasha. The pasuk says, if you don't understand anything, don't understand what to do, ben dam ledam, ben din ledin, ben lega lelega. So the pasuk says you should go up to Yerushalayim. But look how the Arizal reads this pasuk and says this medrash is alluded to in this pasuk. If you don't understand what's going on, the mishpat of mishpatim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the mitzvah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ben dam ledam, meaning the mitzvah of kisui adam, covering the blood. And here we see that the blood, the Jewish blood, is not covered. Ben din ledin, between the din of, the mitzvah of don't kill the behema and its offspring, and it's the same day, and that's unfortunately what they did to us. Benega lenega, between the nega tzaras, that you take the vessels out, and in the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything went, the house and the vessels. How is it? Why is it happening? The answer to all this is what the pasuk concludes and says, because divrei rivois bisharecha, because there is strife, because there is machloikis, because there is no peace. Because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if there is no shalom, there is nothing. Abai said, where did the Rambam live? Where was he born? Spain. Then he moved? Morocco. And from there? Eretz Yisrael. Just a few months, I think 5 months. And then? Egypt. For how long? He got there when he was 27, I believe. He died when he was 69. So it's 42 years that he lived in Egypt. Are you allowed to live in Egypt? Pasuk in our Pasha. The pasuk clearly says, "Lo tosifun lashuv baderech hazeh od." You're not allowed to. In fact, the Rambam himself in Hilchos Melachim, Perek Hey Halacha Zayin Paskins, one is not allowed to live in Egypt, and if he does, he transgresses 3 negative commandments in the Torah. 42 years. It's not like, passing through, in transit. He had a layover in Cairo. How is it possible? The Rambam doesn't fulfill the actual psak that he himself writes.
Didn't he write himself on his letters that he was translating?
Sefer Kaftov Perach, one of the Rishonim, writes in Perek Hey that he heard from one of the descendants of the Rambam, Rav Shmuel, that the Rambam used to sign his own letters, Moshe ben Maimon, that's my name, that transgresses every single day 3 negative commandments of the Torah. Many don't agree to this, and they say it's impossible. They reject it. Can't be. Even Sapir, the Yishrei Lev, the Shvilei Das, the Yechave Das, they say impossible. The Rambam doesn't practice what he himself preaches. That doesn't make any sense. The Rambam says an Isur Doraisa, 3 Isurim, but he's going to do it and he's going to write it, and I'm the one who does it. How is it possible? Not shaykh. And therefore, we have 6 different terutzim. How is it possible for the Rambam to live in Egypt, even though he himself says you're not allowed to live in Egypt? Who are the ones that are giving these terutzim? Gedolei Olam. The Ritva, the Mordechai, the Shoelu Meshiv, the Smag, Rabbeinu Bechaye. Let's see. Some say the Isur to live in Mitzrayim is only if you go down to Mitzrayim in the same way you came out. That's why in Parshas Masei, the Torah details the 42 travels of Klal Yisrael. Who cares? Who cares what the itinerary was? They went from this place to this place to this place, because only if you go down in the same path, that's the Isur. But if you take a flight from wherever you are to Egypt, that's not the Isur. The Ritva says this. Yom Tov Lamed Ches, the Re'em in our Parsha, and the Mordechai. These are Rishonim. Some say the only issue is when Klal Yisrael is here in Eretz Yisrael. Then you're not allowed to leave to go to Egypt and dwell there. But when we're in Galus, the entire Chutz La'aretz is one place, says the Ritva, and then there's no difference if you live in Egypt, in the States, in the 5 towns, or in Egypt, no difference. The Sifri writes that for business, you're allowed to go down to Egypt. And therefore there was no issue, because these people, Gedolei Olam, it wasn't just the Rambam. The Radbaz lived in Egypt, and many Gedolei Olam lived in Egypt. So if you're going there for business, and others, you're not planning to stay there. Sometimes people will get, the Rambam got stuck there for 42 years. But maybe he didn't go there in order to settle the land and to stay there. So if you're going for business, says the Hisorus Tshuva, and that is the grandson of the Chassam Sofer in Yoredei Siman Kuf Pei Beis. If you're going there for business, there is no Isur. The Ritva, again, in Yom Lamed Ches, he offers a few terutzim, and the Re'em, they both say, since Chazal tell us that Sanchev came and confused the entire world, he mixed everybody around. He was very smart. When you conquer a country, ultimately people will rebel against you, because there's patriotism. I like my country. So what did he do? As soon as he conquered a country, let's say he conquered Spain, he took all the Spaniards and he moved them to South Africa. When he conquered South Africa, he took all the people from there and he threw them into Australia, wherever it is. When a person is not in his own birthplace, he doesn't have any association with the country, the new country that he's in. He's not going to come to rebel against him. So since Sancheriv already confused the whole world, Mimele, this is not Mitzrayim that the Torah discusses. The Egyptians of today are not the Egyptians that the Torah discusses, and therefore there's no Esau to live there. The only problem with this, asks the Birkas Aaron and the Shoel Meishiv, has nothing to do with the people. It has to do with the country. The Torah says don't live in this country. The Torah didn't say don't associate with the Egyptians. But because of this question, they write that maybe really the issue is not to mix with the Egyptians. And since these are not the original Egyptians, one will be allowed to live there. The Chaim Shal, the Chidah, and the Minchas Chinuch, in fact, bring that there's a machloikis, whether the issue is to live with the Egyptians, and he made it right now, it doesn't apply, or the issue is to live in the place itself, and therefore it doesn't make a difference who is living there, one would not be allowed. Others say, the Radbaz, he says that the Rambam was anus, he was forced to, because he had to take care, he had to treat, he was the doctor of the person in charge of the ruler in Egypt, and therefore he was forced to be stuck there. And the Radbaz himself says about himself that that's something that he got stuck with. He came there to teach Torah you're allowed to, and he says, I open up a yeshiva here, and that's the reason I am relying on in order to continue living in Egypt. That's what the Radbaz says. Sixth answer, Rabbeinu Bechaya, in our Pasha, Rabbeinu Bechaya, big chiddush. He says this issue only applied back then. Back then, the Egyptian were such an abomination to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were involved in such disgusting thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, stay away from them. But this is an issue l'sha and not l'doyos, and not for generations. Because he says, you see, a lot of people live in Egypt. This is the Rabbeinu Bechaya, 900 years ago. He writes, many people live there. And if it was an issue, the Gedolim would protest against it. So we have 6 different reasons why the Rambam can live in Egypt.
Those who are they cholek on just what that he wrote in the letter or on these answers?
They say that he never wrote it. The Kafto Maperach says, I heard when I was in Mitzrayim from one of his great-grands, I don't know how many generations of Shmuel, that my grandfather, my great-grandfather, the Rambam, used to sign his letters, Moshe ben Maimon, the one who transgresses 3 Yisurim every single day. And many rejects it, say, impossible. And it's something that people who hated the Rambam said about the Rambam. Not true, never happened.
Well, they really lived there.
We know that he lived there. The question, did he sign, the one who transgresses 3 Yisurim D'Oraisa every single day? Can it be? So why are you there? Leave. The nafkamina of all this is today. When tomorrow they offer you a great vacation in Cairo, Alexandria, should you go? Can you go? I don't know if you want to go.
For Pesach?
What's that?
For Pesach.
Pesach. Should you go back there for Pesach? The Yechavet Das in Chelek Gimel Simen Pei Aleph writes, you're allowed to. If you're allowed to go for business, so you're also allowed to go for a short vacation. And therefore there in his Shuvah he writes that he allows reporters to go. Israeli reporters asked him, can we go? There are all kinds of things going on in Egypt. For political reasons, we have to be there to report what's going on, and he allows them to go. So, if they offer you Air Egypt, I don't know what airline they have, to go there, there's a great deal of a lifetime. Technically speaking, you're allowed to. I'm not sure you want to, and I'm not sure that's the best place to go. It could be that Koisel is a little better, but... Everybody is familiar with the lie detector test? What is it called? A polygraph? When was it invented? Can we rely on it? When was it invented? Anyone knows? 20 years? 150 years?
50 years ago.
50. Can you rely on it?
Some people say yes, some people say no.
And what do you say? And what does the Torah say?
Not to rely on it.
In our Pasha, the Torah clearly says, Api shnayim eidim yakum dava. You need 2 kosher witnesses. Is the lie detector a kosher witness? Is he 2 witnesses? Can we rely on it? You don't like it? How about 2 lie detectors? Api shnayim eidim.
About cameras, we can ask the same question.
Cameras?
Maybe
Cameras can be manipulated.
if that's why he didn't see the lie detector being done, it could be...
The lie detector is after the fact. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, in Chek Design and Sibin Mem Zayin, you cannot rely on a lie detector because it uses all kinds of indicators of stress, like breathing rate, perspiration, blood pressure, pulse rate, And it has to do a lot with the person who administers the tests, how he interprets what he sees. So it's what's called umdina. It's not 100%. It's an umdina based on the person who conducts the test, what he thinks that these indicators are telling him. So that's called an umdina. We do not paskin based on an umdina. We need 2 kosher witnesses. Why am I bringing this? Because you just told us that the first one was invented 50 years ago. That Tzitz Eliezer begs to differ. The first one was invented 2,800 years ago. Polygraph, 2,800 years ago. Who had one? Shlomo HaMelech. Pilei Ploi. Says Tzitz Eliezer. Shlomo HaMelech, the Gemara says, Rosh Hashanah Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, wanted to paskin not based on 2 witnesses. The Zohar Kodesh writes in Yesod Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, he had a very sophisticated chair, very special chair. Kol man dekariv lekursaya, anyone who came close to this chair. V'chol man dekariv beshikra, anyone who would lie coming close to this chair of his. Mashchecha ahud yokna ve'aviyada Shlomo Malka de beshikra kaasi. He had these wheels, the bottom of the chair, that if somebody would lie, these wheels would start turning, and the animals that were connected to this chair, he had all kinds of animals, would start moving. And Shlomo Melech would know this guy is lying. And he wanted to paskin based on this. It's the first polygraph in the world, 2,800 years ago. But the Gemara says, a bas kol came from Shamayim. A heavenly voice emanated from Shamayim and says, sorry, you can't use this polygraph. You must use al pi shnaim edim yakum davar. We need 2 kosher witnesses. So even the most sophisticated one, created, invented by Shlomo Melech, doesn't work. Since we discussed Shlomo Melech, it's kedai to know what the Medrash Tanchuma says. Mamish unbelievable. In Va'era, in Simen Hey, listen to a language of Medrash. Esek shenisasek Shloimo bidvarim betelim het uhu. Since Shlomo Melech, it's very hard to say this, was engaged in vain matters, it made him making a mistake. The pasuk says in Melachim Aleph, Vayihi le'es ziknat Shloimo. Shloimo was older. Nashav hitu es levavo. His wives swayed his heart. Acharei Elohim acherim, as if after avodah zarah. The Gemara darshans this. It doesn't really mean what it really says. But Omar Rabchia Baraba no yachlo leShloimo ilu haya goyref bivin. Shlomo HaMelech would rather be a street cleaner ve'al yikatev alav hapasuk hazeh, in order to avoid having this pasuk being written about him. Umigaram lo, so what caused him that this pasuk was written as if he was involved in avodah zarah? Shenisasek bedvarim shelo hayalo tzoyrech bahen, because he was involved in things that he really shouldn't have. Dvarim betelim, meaning how careful we have to be if we would understand what it means not to have a pasuk against you in the Tanakh. Shlomo HaMelech would rather, this means he would rather not have Beis HaMikdash, not bring all the korbanos, and he brought a lot of korbanos, 1,000 oilos, 1,000 korbanos, oila, every single day. He would rather not have all of this just to avoid a pasuk saying he was involved with avodah zarah. He would rather be a street cleaner. That's the language of the Medrash. Unbelievable. The pasuk says, "Uviyata hara mikirbecha." Eradicate all evil from your midst. Reb Steinman once said to a person, you should know there's all kinds of mitzvahs in the Torah. Some mitzvahs are for somebody else. Chesed, you help others. Some mitzvahs are against the other person, like this. Uviyata hara mikirbecha. Eradicate all evil from your midst. Reb Steinman told him, you should know, I advise you, don't look for this type of mitzvah. For 2 reasons. First of all, for this mitzvah, there's a lot of people who are interested in it. A lot of people are interested in the uviyata hara, doing the mitzvah, Shem Shamayim. And second of all, it's very, very hard to do this mitzvah 100% L'Shem Shamayim, with no personal negiah. No, I'm doing L'Shem Shamayim. 100% for Kodesh Baruch Hu. Very difficult. And therefore, leave this mitzvah for others. But lemaisa, there is a mitzvah called uviyata hara mikirbecha. So how do you fulfill it? Moshe Feinstein with a great insight. How do you fulfill uviyata hara? Eradicate all evil from your midst. When you conduct yourself in the right way, and people look at you and say, wow, it's a living example. He's a role model for how one is supposed to conduct himself. That eradicates all evil from within your midst. That's the way to fulfill it. You don't have to go with a sword and try killing people. There's no need to. Just conduct yourself in the most perfect way that you can. People will look at you, and that in itself eradicates all evil from our midst. It's a great chiddush on this pasuk for the Meshech Chochmah. He asks, the pasuk says, Yad ha'edim tiyeh bo barishoyna le'amisoy, v'yad kol ha'am ba'achroyna, uvi'ata hara mikirbecha. You have two witnesses. They brought a person to Beis Din, and they passed him, you have to kill him. Stoning. Who throws the first stone? The witnesses themselves. Why? Yad ha'edim, the hands of the witnesses first, and then everybody else. Why? They already did their job. They testified. Beis Din made a psak. Finished, let's get rid of him. Why do the Eidim have to kill him? Says the Meshech Chochmah. Because when the Eidim saw this person commits whatever Aveira it was, it affected them, that their attitude towards this mitzvah, it's a little tainted now, it's a little chilled off a little. They saw Chilul Shabbos. Shabbos lost a little of its sanctity in their own eyes. And therefore when the pasuk says, Uvi'ata hara mikirbecha, eradicate all evil from within your midst, we always thought it's within Klal Yisrael, make sure you remove the evil. No! It's mikirbecha of the Eidim. The Eidim were affected by what they saw, and therefore when they killed the person who did that Aveira, it would clean themselves up to restore again, for example, Shabbos, the sanctity of Shabbos. Because it was affected when they saw Chilul Shabbos. What does that mean to be affected? Chofetz Chaim lived in a small city, Radin. Everybody was Shomer Shabbos in Radin. There's no such thing as a Chilul Shabbos, and he never saw Chilul Shabbos. During the First World War, where he had to run away from Radin, got to a big city. And in that big city, they moved to a place in Russia. And the first Shabbos, a lot of Jews there, some of them were secular, and for the first time in his life, the Chofetz Chaim saw Chilul Shabbos. And the Chofetz Chaim cried, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried. The following week, again, they're still there, and the Chofetz Chaim saw again a Chilul Shabbos. Reb Chaim Zaychik in his Sefer Or Chadesh writes that the Chofetz Chaim cried and cried and cried more in the second Shabbos, more so than the first Shabbos. Then he spoke to the Talmidim of the yeshiva. And they asked him, Rebbe, last week you cried. First time you saw Chilul Shabbos. We understand? This week you see Chilul Shabbos, you cry. Fine. But why are you crying now more so than you cried last week? The Chofetz Chaim said, the first time I saw Chilul Shabbos last week, it broke me up. Jews, Chilul Shabbos, how can it be? This week when I saw Chilul Shabbos again, it upset me so much, but more than that, I was upset at myself. How come it's not bothering me the same way it bothered me last week? Now I'm crying for myself. What's wrong with you, Rabbi Soel Meir? That you can see Jews Mechal Shabbos and it doesn't move you to the same degree it did last week. Now I'm crying for myself. Halevai, that the first time we see a Chilul Shabbos, it's going to affect us like the 25th time it affects the Chofetz Chaim. Halevai. The Chazon Ish was once walking in Meibak, the Rav Barzam, and suddenly they see, it's Friday night, and suddenly they see a light of a car coming close. Chofetz Chaim, the Chazon Ish grabs Rav Barzam's hand, and they jumped into a field of thorns. Rav Barzam says to him, Rebbe, it hurts. Frick, it hurts. And the Chazon Ish tells him it's kedai that it's going to hurt in order not to see a Chilul Shabbos. And that's basically what the Meshech Chochmah was saying. It affects you when you see a Chilul Shabbos. There he goes Moshe. Moshe, in Yoredei Chelek Aleph, Siman Kuf Nun Vav, is asked by a moyel that he says to him, I have to go do a bris on Shabbos, and I know there's going to be a lot of Chilul Shabbos, a lot of secular people are going to come to the bris. Can I go? Should I go? And then he goes, Moshe writes to him, just like in Maseches Yuma Daf Ayin we learn that Berov Am Hadras Melech, and when a mitzvah is done in front of a lot of people, it's a beautification for a king. So too we can learn from that when his Aveira is done in front of a lot of people, it's a bigger Aveira. You have to stay away. He says to him, since you're a moyer, go do the mitzvah and run away as soon as you can. Because to see Chilul Shabbos, it's It's a tremendous avera. When a lot of people are present, it's a big avera. The Avnei Nezer wrote a very chashuv sefer called Eglei Tal on Hilchos Shabbos. There's no such thing as a yeshiva that doesn't have Eglei Tal, and if there is, you gotta ask the Rosh Yeshiva what type of yeshiva that is. Everybody learns the Eglei Tal. The Avnei Nezer said, in order to write a sefer about Hilchos Shabbos, you have to be extremely careful. In all Hilchos Shabbos, Prateya Kavanoseh V'Dikdukiya, and the Eglei Tal writes that the only reason the Eglei Tal, his sefer, was accepted, such a degree that it was, is because he only saw one Chilul Shabbos in his life. And if he would have seen one more Chilul Shabbos, it would not be accepted like he did. What was that one time Chilul Shabbos that he saw? He lived in Sochachov. He's a Sochachov Rebbe. The Shem Shmuel is his son. So in Sochachov, again, like Radin, there's no such thing as a Chilul Shabbos. Everybody's Shomer Shabbos. But once he had to go for medical reasons to Königsberg, a city in Germany, and then in the middle of the city he saw a Yid Mechal Shabbos. He got so upset. He went over to this Yid and he slapped him in his face. It bothered him so much. Oh, it was a big commotion. The police came. A priest came over to the police and said, I see this rabbi is doing it l'shem shamayim. He's not doing it because he wants to hurt another person. Leave him alone. And they released him. He was doing it with mamish kina, zeri for Kodesh Baruch Hu. And that type of Chilul Shabbos that he said that if I would have seen one more Chilul Shabbos, it would affect me so much, the Eglei Tal would be accepted. How careful we have to be, not only to avoid our own transgressions, to make sure we don't see other people's transgressions.
The rabbi here that I heard that when they're gone, once and he fainted.
He wants what?
He tapped and he fainted.
Touched his own beard and he fainted.
What?
He touched his own beard and he fainted because he was afraid maybe he's pulling a hair out. Riddle of the week. We learn about Sefer Torah in this parasha, so let's ask, can it be that there's a Sefer Torah? Kosher. Beautiful. Shh. No one like it. The most beautiful Sefer Torah out there. There's no Indian of vows, no Nadarim, everybody is healthy, and yet you're not allowed to read from the Sefer. Can it be? Gorgeous Sefer Torah. Not allowed to read from it. How could it be? No. Godol Hador wrote it. Godol Hador. You never saw anything like it. Gorgeous. Godol Hador with Yichud all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. No mamzerim. The most gorgeous Sefer Torah out there. There is nothing like it. No Nadarim, everybody feels great. You're not allowed to read from it. The answer is, Kesef Mishnah and Hilchos Melachim Perek Gimel Halach Aleph writes, based on a Tosefta, that a hediot, a simpleton, a regular person, is not allowed to read from a Sefer Torah that we learn about in this parasha, a Sefer Torah belonging to the king. No one is allowed to read from it. So no matter how beautiful it is, only the king will be allowed to read from it. We cannot, unless you are appointed as a king. So the Pasuk speaks about the king. Som tasim alecha melech. The Rambam Paskins, Hilchos Melachim, Perek Beis Halacha Hey. The king has to get a haircut. How often? Every single day. Shneimar melech beyofio techezer einecha. He has to be beautiful. Every single day he has to get a haircut. Right after that, the Rambam Paskins another halacha. You have to have fear and trepidation from a king. And therefore, you're not allowed to see the king when he takes his yarmulke off and he is by the barber. Not allowed to. That's not yira and not fear when you see a person getting a haircut. So tell me, how is it possible that the king is supposed to get a haircut every single day and nobody's allowed to be there? How can the barber give him a haircut? He's also a yid. What's that? That you say, but the Rambam didn't write in parentheses, except for the barber. He didn't write that. He wrote he must get a haircut every single day. By the way, no one is allowed to be there. No one is allowed to be there. That means the barber also is not allowed to be there. So he's supposed to do it like this and hope for the best? Who would want to get a haircut from a barber like that? That would be terrible. Oh! Perhaps bring a guy. A qualified guy that doesn't hate this king. And it could work. And that doesn't do anything to the yira of us. That's a guy is not commanded in that. That's one answer out of three. Or, what's that?
If if there is a yid present to cut your hair, you should go to the yid, not the goy, because you can cut your sideburns too short. He doesn't know halacha.
We're going to teach him the halacha, and we're going to have a lot of people watching from the outside, not seeing the king, and making sure he doesn't do anything he shouldn't be doing. It's no problem. Another option.
Maybe his son or maybe somebody else who's also royalty could...
A son potentially could be a big problem.
To cut hair.
What's that?
And a goy get a venture to cut hair.
Why not? Why can't you go to a goy?
Because not a venture.
Because you have a what?
Two of them. Not kashrut. To cut hair.
First of all, a kashrus for a barber is a new invention. It's a great invention. You should definitely go to a person who has it. But it's a new invention in town. When did it start? 5-7 years ago? As long as the person knows what he's doing, you're good to go. If Reb Chaim Kanievsky offers to cut your hair, and he says, but I still don't have the certificate, I didn't get it, you will say, so sorry, I can't go to you?
A lot of people don't sit in my chair.
It's not a problem. We'll teach this guy all the halachos, and we'll even give him a certificate. What's the problem? We'll test him.
I don't know if an halacha that the warrant he may cut you from behind if he's...
That's when you're by yourself. So we'll have people supervising. We'll have more goyim supervising and Jews, no problem. Another option, if there's another king, the Melech Yehuda, and there's another Melech for the other Shvatim, so one of the people from the other Shvatim can have fear for the other king, but they don't have to have fear for the king of Yehuda. So he can give the haircut to our king, to King Yehuda. Or, maybe you can take a katan. A katan is not chayv in mitzvahs. I don't know how professional he's going to be when he's 12 years old, but if he is, you trained him and he knows what he's doing, maybe you have to ask the king if he wants this 12-year-old to give him a haircut. But if he can, lichoira, that can work as well. What do you yell when you crown a new king?
Long live the king.
Long live the king! Where is this from? If you're English, you have to know this. But you didn't practice it in many years. You had 70 years, I think you had a queen, right? But recently you did. Where does this come from? We have a rule. There's nothing that's in the Torah, and the Novi. In the Torah. There's nothing that's not alluded to in the Torah. The Torah says to the king, you do this and you do this and you do this, leman yarich yamim al mamlachto, you'll have longevity. Comes the Chizkuni. Chizkuni is one of the Rishonim. And he writes, why does the Torah have to say, you'll have longevity if you do this? Because in Psachim Pei Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Rabbanus mekaberes es ba'aleha. If you're positioned now in a position of prominence, authority over other people, it can shorten your life. We see it from Yosef HaTzadik, shorten his life. Rabbanus, being in a position over people, can shorten your life. So the Torah has to say, don't worry, do everything right, and I'll give you longevity. And he says, this is the source that people yell, Yechi HaMelech, long live the king, when you crown a new king, because you have to go against what the Chazal say, that it's going to shorten your life. So we give him a bracha, you should live a long, healthy life. Pillei ploi.
When did it start? People doing that for barbing as well and washing your shivers?
It's a Gemara in Gittin Samech Beis. Man Malchei, Rabbanon. Rabbanon are called Melachim. So if to the king you say Yechi HaMelech, long live the king, you have to say it to the Rabbanon as well. So in this parsha we talk about going to war. A soldier that didn't start living in his house, he comes back. Didn't marry his, he got engaged but still didn't get married. Or he has a vineyard. What about a person who built a house but it's a temporary house? Does he also come back from war and he can't fight? Or only if it's a permanent dwelling?
Like a tent or like a polipach house?
Polipach. He built a temporary dwelling for the next 3-4 months, for whatever reason, until his house is ready. He built a little temporary place. Does that also qualify him to be exempt, to have to come back for more? The Shaila of Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal. What do you say, Rabbi saying? So how it also qualifies. So even if it's for a day? So Reb Chaim Sugis is the proof that not. Because what if, Chas v'sholom, there's a war in the month of Tishrei? Does it remind you anything? A war in the month of Tishrei. 11 months ago we started one. During Sukkot, one day after. So if Khalila, a war breaks out in the middle of the month of Tishrei, in the middle of Sukkot, you want to tell me there's not going to be any wars? No soldiers, everybody has to come back? Everybody is living in a temporary dwelling. It's called a sukkah. So it must be that a sukkah, or a temporary dwelling, does not exempt the soldier from going to war. But the pasuk says, Ki tikrav el ir lehilachem aleh. If you go, you put a city under siege. The Rambam Paskins, Hilchos Melachim, Perek Vav Halacha Zayin, when you do put a city under siege, you do not surround it from all 4 directions, only from 3. So we allow those who want to escape to do so. Why? It will be easier, faster, to completely close on them from all 4 directions?
Because otherwise they will. But the only option they have is to fight. So it would be a Yichud. So I thought Shlomo Melech did somehow the same thing when he told, I don't remember who cannot get out.
Shimi.
Right.
Shimi ben Gera. How do you compare between the two?
In the sense that when he says you cannot get out, so
So he had this yetzer to go out.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
So let them fight. Why do we put them under siege? Because we think we're stronger.
it's better to conquer and let them go instead of just fighting them.
Says that Tolos Adam, very close to what you're saying. Meshech Chochmah says the same thing. When you give a person no choice, and he cannot run away because you closed all directions, he's going to give up hope. And when a person gives up hope, he becomes extremely dangerous. He can commit suicide, he can do crazy things. What do I have to lose? Anyways, we're dying. So he can go crazy, and says the Meshech Chochmah that great nitzchoinus came because of the great despair. Because people lose all hope, they go all out, and because of that they win. So this is done in order to allow you to conquer the place. Give them a chance to run away, and they will. And if you give them no chance, who knows what they're going to do? Givaldic strategy.
In history, I don't know who it was, but when they used to go to walk on the sea, he used to set fire to the sea, and all of that they either win or die. Same idea.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. In this parsha we learn also about Baal Tashchis, also part of learning about war. Baal Tashchis, not allowed to destroy something that still works for no good reason. And yet, my question today is, when is it a mitzvah to burn a vessel which is mutar be'ana? It works. It's mutar be'ana. It's a mitzvah for you to go and burn it. It's not tameh. It's mutar be'ana. This applies today. Even the Torah says Baal Tashchis, and we say yes, Tashchis, burn it. Ir Nidachas, there's no Ir Nidachas today. And by the way, Ir Nidachas never was. So Gemara and Kiddushin, never was, never will be.
What is the item?
Applies today. A vessel.
A vessel.
Mutar be'ana, not tameh, and yet, even though the Torah says don't destroy things, we say burn it.
Is the chametz a vessel?
Chametz is not a vessel. Chametz is asur be'ana on Pesach, and I'm saying it's mutar be'ana, not tameh, not food. It's a vessel. Go and burn it. You're very close. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Simin Taf Mem Hey Seif Gimel. The Rema writes, when you do bdikas chametz, you take a vessel with you. What if you don't find any chametz? You didn't find anything. You didn't put the 10 things, so you didn't find them. Says the Rema, burn the vessel itself. He brings it from the Maharil. Why? So we shouldn't forget there's such a thing called the mitzvah of biur chametz. And therefore it's a usable kli. It's mutar be'ana. It's not tameh. Go and burn it. Why? So you shouldn't forget biur chametz. Since we discussed war appears in the parsha, and in Yana Deyoima, we're combining all 3. Listen to a maisa. 2 years ago, Adar Sheni, Tafshin Pei Beis, a terrorist, Yemach Shemo, came into Bnei Brak and started shooting. There was an Avech there who saw what's going on, so he ran into one of the buildings. The terrorists ran after him. This guy started going up the stairs and opening doors, trying to open up doors. Everything was locked. He came to the 4th floor, I think, and one of the doors opened up. He immediately closed it and locked it. Whew. He's saved. Turns around. Oh, there's a woman there. Uh-oh. You married? Yeah. Is your husband in town? He says, yeah. Anyone else in the house? No. Am I allowed to be here? Yichud. If a husband is in town, it's less of a problem. It's no problem. But the husband is not coming. There's a terrorist shooting in the streets. The husband is not coming. So what does it help me that he's in town? Am I allowed to be here? Is Yichud an accessory, a bizrayu, the Gilui Arayos, and therefore even for Pikuach Nefesh you can't do it? Or Pikuach Nefesh overrides everything, except the three Averos Chamuros, the Gilui Arayos itself. What a shayla, Rabbi say. Should he get out?
Yichud is the Rabbanon, isn't it?
Yichud is the Rabbanon? Yichud is the Rabbanon? Soon we'll see. Yichud with Pnuya or Yichud with a married woman? Soon we'll see.
If the door was unlocked, would it be no problem?
But he wants to lock it. There's a terrorist climbing up the stairs.
But the terrorist, so unfortunately, the terrorist walks through even locked doors. In other words, the door is potentially.
So terrorist is saving him from Yichud. That doesn't work. Because according to the Rema, you need two kosher men, and he's not so kosher. And he's not such a man, he's a wilde chaya, a wild animal.
Is it a one-room apartment, or she can go lock herself in another room?
What a gewaldig advice. Gewaldig. Why does she have to lock herself? He can lock himself also.
He locks himself in another room.
Let's say there it's only one bedroom, only one room, no locks.
Windows don't count?
Windows don't count. It's a fourth floor. I want to know if Yichud permits, if Sakana, permits Yichud or not. Pikuach Nefesh permits Yichud or not. That's the shayla.
Good nefesh for the lady as well, because why?
But he is the one. So she should tell him, excuse me, this is my house. I'll be protected here. I'm not in danger. Please, just get out. And daven for the best. I'll also daven for you. Or not. She's not going to stand. She's going to sit.
She'll look herself in the bathroom.
What's that?
The bathroom.
Doesn't have a lock. You're trying to get away from the question. I'm trying to come back to the question. What's that?
And it's both stand at different windows.
Fourth floor, nobody sees anything. The fact that her husband is in town helps us here. When he can't come, the terrorist is shooting like crazy in the streets. What does it help us? You know he's not going to come here for the next 45 minutes. Is that going to help you?
If she telephones her husband and speaking with him.
What's that?
If she phones her husband and speaking with him.
No reception where he is.
The whole reason we allow the husbands in the town is because there's a fear or something, right?
Mirtas, intimidation, fear.
It could be that.
So there is no fear when she knows he can't come.
No, but maybe there is. Maybe she does feel something that he could come, may come, terrorists might be killed, the police might collect. There's a certain sense of not jeopardizing her marriage and her life psychologically.
It doesn't have if the door is locked. Bala is not having the door is locked. Bala doesn't have if the door is locked.
Why not? It's coming any second. It's Mirtas, she's afraid.
I mean, the situation is that there's a terrorist up there. They're in great danger. The last thing they're thinking is doing this.
Who cares what they're thinking? If it's asu, it's asu. Gilui Arayos is asu. Is Yichud an abizrayu of Gilui Arayos? Is Yichud an accessory, abizrayu of Gilui Arayos? And if that's the case, it's asu. What can you do? It's one of the three cardinal sins.
So no miltas from the terrorist?
And if so?
Was trembling with terrorist.
But once you see from the window that the terrorist goes to the next building, you're good to go.
Because that doesn't apply.
What's that?
Because that message doesn't apply.
Piknoch Nefesh doesn't apply?
Why? Because they're saying because that you don't get to the other eyes if they're saying they're going to kill you if you do this, so you die, right?
Pikuach Nefesh means if I open the door and I go out there, the terrorist may kill me. It's a Pikuach Nefesh for me.
May kill you.
Yeah. It's a Pesafek Pikuach Nefesh for the guy. He's running away from him and he's chasing him. It's Pikuach Nefesh for the guy.
Now it becomes box never for her too.
What's that?
Now she is in Pikuach Nefesh also at this point. Because
So he's the one potentially that has to step out. She's fine. She's going to lock the door right after him. She's fine. The question is, does his sakana, his pikuach nefesh, permit him to transgress yichud? Is there yichud here, bichlal?
Abizrayu, we said.
Abizrayu, is it? And if it is, Abizrayu of Giloy Araus is also asu. It's yehareg ve'al yavur. You better kill yourself and not transgress. Short of $1 million.
Forcing you to transgress. If somebody has a gun to your head and says you have to do this, you can say kill me.
That's when they tell you, kill this guy, unless, otherwise we'll kill you. So you have to say, no, kill me. But who gives you permission to transgress certain aveios in order to save yourself? That's exactly what you're not allowed to do.
You're also putting, there's another question. He's putting the woman's life in danger also.
No, the door is locked, no problem. She's not in danger. Now they're not in danger. The question is he allowed to do this? Rabbi Isai, it's a machloikes, a poiskim.
What's his option? What's his alternative?
Get out.
Put her in danger.
Get out.
Oh, so if she locks the door herself, she's also...
She's fine. She's protected. But he can't transgress yichud to save himself. Or maybe not. Machloikes, a poiskim. Are you supposed to be moiser nefesh in order not to transgress yichud? Or that in a makom sakana, you're allowed to transgress yichud. Shalos etshuvas tzu Yaakov. He was from the Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin, Meir Shapira of Lublin. He writes, Isu Yichud is a branch of Gilui Arayos, and that is included with what the Rema writes in Yoredea, Kuf Nun Zayin Seif Aleph, that even in Abizrayu de Gilui Arayos, in the accessories, Yehareg ve'al yavo, you have to kill yourself before you transgress it. But the Emek Shaila, the grandson of the Divrei Chaim, he writes that Isu Yichud is allowed in Pikuach Nefesh. Where does he bring a raya? Beautiful raya. From Chana. In Masechet Brachos Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, we learn that Chana said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to have a kid! The Gemara records her whole claim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then she says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you know what? If you don't give me a kid, you know what I'm going to do? What did she say she's going to do? I'm going to be secluding myself with somebody, and then, but Lemais, I'm not going to do anything with him. And what's the reward the Torah promises in Parshas Naso for a woman who does that? I will force you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to have kids. So says the Emek Shaila, excuse me, how did she say she's going to do it if there's an Isu? If there's an Isu Yichud, you're not allowed to do this. Was she threatening HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm going to do an Aveira in order for you to give me a kid? It must be that Chana was a mesukenet, it was a pikuach nefesh for her not to have a kid. Why? What did Rachel Imenu say to Yaakov? Give me children, and if not, v'ima'in? Mesa anochi. It's a pikuach nefesh shaila for me. You see from here, from pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to do yichud. Gevaldi garaya. Easy to reject. It is gorgeous, but it's so easy to reject it. Why? Because the Pnei Yoshua already there in Brachos asked this question. Excuse me, Chana, what are you doing? You're threatening HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're going to do an Isu? And he adds another question to Pnei Yoshua. What? You want to erase HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name? What do you do with a woman who's secluded? You bring her to Beis HaMikdash and you allow her to drink from the Megillah, which you erase HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. That's what you want to do, Chana? And therefore the Pnei Yoshua says she didn't mean it. What she said is that was part of her davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as if claiming on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know, technically speaking, what I can do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You know that technically speaking, I can force you to give me a kid if I were to go and to do yichud with someone else. Not that Lemaisa she would do it, chas v'sholom. So she says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, now that I'm not doing it, I can't have a kid because I'm keeping your Torah. That was her claim, not that I'm really Lemaisa going to do it. Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes in Das Noita, before him, the Netziv in Meromei Sadeh, the Doivev Meisharim, they all write that what she said is, I'm going to do Yichud in front of my husband Elkanah. He's going to be in town. When your husband is in town, there is no love. You're still not allowed to do it. But you still will get the reward, what the Torah says, V'nikta v'nizra azera, you will have children. That's what she meant. I'm going to do it in front of my husband Elkanah. Shaul Tzetshuvis Shem Aryeh, he writes that when we say Begilui Arayos Yehareg ve'al Yavor, that's when you have an Isu Erva. that you have the punishment of kares, but an isur lav, and that's all yichud is, it's a negative command, it's a lav, for sure it will be rejected for pikuach nefesh. Why? Because we have a rule. What happens when a positive commandment clashes with a negative one? Who wins? The positive overrides the negative. And when you have atzalas nefashot, it's a positive commandment. Which one? How do we know we have to save a life? No, that tells you, watch the exceedingly. We learn it from next week's Parsha and Parshas Mishpatim as well. Hashava Saveda. If you have to save your friend, you have to give him the $5 shekel pen that he lost. How much more so you have to restore his body? That's the chiyuv, by the way, for doctors to heal. The Gemara learns in Sanhedrin that the whole chiyuv for doctors to heal is learned from Hashava Saveda. So you have a positive commandment to help, to save, and you have a negative one. Stay away from Yichud. Positive clashes with a negative, the positive overrides, and therefore the Shem Aryeh writes, Yichud is rejected for pikuach nefesh. Bichlal, this isu, you said before it's an isu derabanan. Not so pashut. It's a machlokes rishonim. The Rambam, in isu bia, in Perek HaBeis writes, isu Yichud is midivrei Kabbalah. So the Beis Yosef writes, based on the Rambam, that it's not an isu d'oraisa. And that's the Beis Shmuel writes there as well. But the Magid Mishneh there writes, then it's an Isur Deoraisa. That's what the Rashba brings, the Beis Shmuel brings. That's the opinion of the Tur and the Tosfos, and the Pisrei Tshuva says over there that most poskim hold that it's an Isur Deoraisa. But in our case, it's a little easier because her husband is in town. And even though, technically speaking, right now he can't come because the Michigan out there in the streets shooting, but the fact that he is in town makes it a little easier. Why? Because what's the whole heter of her husband is in town? Ba'ila ba'ir. Is it because her husband can come, and right now he can't come? Or is it because Emas Ba'ala Aleya, because she's afraid her husband potentially can come? Machlokes Achronim. The Chidan Shiurei Bracha in Siman Chav Beis writes that if for sure her husband can't come, there is no heter of Ba'ala ba'ir. But he brings the Sefer Me'oi Re'or, says, you have the seter. But the Chazon Ish says, you expect him to be a machmir. Chazon Ish says, if her husband is in town, even if he can't come, she is not transgressing Yichud. Why? Because it's a built-in Eima, fear that she has. My husband is in town. But you know he can't come. My husband is in town. She's afraid. She's not going to do anything. And there's a heter and there is no Yichud. There's a very interesting machlokes between Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Reb Elyoshiv. What happens with a woman whose husband is not in town, but she thinks he is? A guy comes over and says, you know, your husband is in town. Oh, yeah, Baruch Hashem, great. So there is no Yichud here, or yes? Reb Shlomo Zalman says, if the guy says to her, your husband is in town, and she will believe him, since she feels her husband is down, so there is Eima, there is fear of her husband, and therefore there is no Isu Yichud, even though her husband is in a different country. That's what Reb Shlomo Zalman wants to say. In other words, this heter of her husband is in town is because of fear, and the Metzias doesn't change a thing. Comes Rebbe Elyoshiv and says, no. When Chazal say Ba'ala Ba'ir, it means there is no plug. There's no plug. If he's in town, she's afraid of him. If he's not in town, doesn't make a difference what you're going to sell her. There is no heter. And the opposite, when her husband is really in town, but she thinks he left town, Rebbe Elyoshiv will tell her, as long as her husband is in town, it doesn't make a difference what she thinks. There is a heter. There is no yichud. Reb Shlomo Zalman will say, but she's not afraid. If she's not afraid, because she thinks he's out of town, there is no heter. Machlokes, it's a metzius, or is this a ema, the mirtas, the fear that she has because her husband is in town?
Two questions. What if he was out of town? What if she thought he was out of town and really he was in town?
Oh!
Did she get, no, sorry.
That's the machlokes between them. Either directions. If he's in town and she thinks he's out of town, or if he's out of town and she thinks is it mirtas? She's afraid because she thinks he's here. Or it's a metzius. For whatever reason, when a husband is close, the woman is afraid. Nafkamina today, Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, Petach Tikva are three different cities, but they're all connected. If a husband is in Tel Aviv, there is no Yichud, even though the wife is in Ramat Gan or Petach Tikva. They're all connected. It's considered one big city. When Chazal say, if her husband is in town, Chazal didn't say, but if a big city, London or New York, it doesn't count. Chazal didn't say that. And therefore, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, even if it's a big city and that's going to take him 45 minutes, she knows he's in the other side of town. Doesn't make a difference. Chazal didn't say where in town. As long as he is in town, there is no Yichud. So back to our Shaila, Lichoira, the best advice will be what you suggested. Tell the guy to go into a room and lock himself up. This is a Sha'ar Tziyun, brings us in Siman Reish Lamedes, that if there's a woman in the house, he should lock himself up, because in Yichud, we're not afraid we're going to change things. We're not looking at the future. Oh, maybe he's going to lock the door. You see, there is no Yichud if the door is open. Why are you not afraid? He's going to close the door, he's going to lock it, and he's going to remain with her. We're not afraid in Yichud, the Metzius will change. So as long as he is locked in a room, there is no Yichud. So that is what we suggest if there is a lock there in the room, in the apartment. And even if not, we have a few heterim that we saw in order to permit it.
Let's go back to Kana and Sota. If a woman's secluded with a man, does the husband have a fear to bring her? Or if he doesn't suspect her?
The Yichud, the stira that she did is only when he warned her. Don't do this! And she transgressed what he said, then he has to bring it, then he has the mechuyav to bring it to Beis HaMikdash.
With Hannah's claim, she's treading Hashem. Her husband doesn't suspect her.
I'm going to make my husband tell me, because I'm going to tell you, I'm planning to be secluded with this guy. Elkanah is going to say, no. Don't dare do it. And then I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to force you as if to have a child. I once asked Abraham Kanievsky, based on a pasuk we're going to read next week in Mitzvah Hashem. There's a guy who hears a siren. What do you do when you hear a siren? You run to the shelter. And he goes in there and he sees a lot of women dressed very, very immodestly. They're more undressed than they're dressed. Is he allowed to go in? Should he go in? You think he's going to be protected there? The pasuk in next week parasha says that if a Kodesh Baruch Hu sees something immodest in your camp, what does he do in time of war? He leaves. V'shav macharecha. He's going to leave. So you think there's wide, thick walls here, give me protection. There is no protection. It's thin as a paper. Once the Kodesh Baruch Hu is not there, he left because he saw something on Snil Stick. There is no protection. You're better off outside. Should you go in or not? Reb Chaim writes to me, he should go in and close his eyes. I asked him, Rebbe, just looking, is that also considered a bizrayu de gilu yarayos, accessories to gilu yarayos, which the Beis Shmuel says yes, and therefore, yeharek ve'al yavo? Reb Chaim writes to me, yes. So I said, Rebbe, back to our question. Imagine it's a case that he's not going for 15 seconds to the shelter. He has to be there 24 hours. That's the law. You have a siren, 24 hours. Impossible for him, a tiny little place to close his eyes. Impossible. He's going to have to see them. Should he go in? Should he stay out? What protection will it provide? Reb Chaim writes to me, Ones rachmana patre upikuach nefesh doiche hakol. He should go in. He's an oines. Daven for the best. Close your eyes, maybe give him a little shir or try to teach him about tznius, I don't know. But Reb Chaim says, Oines rachmana patri upikuach nefesh doiche hakol.
You should put a test in front of yourself.
It's true, but in this case I'm not putting it as choosing. Kodesh Baruch Hu is the one who told me, watch yourself exceedingly, run to the shelter. I'm just doing what Kodesh Baruch Hu says, and I am in oines rachmana patri.
Well, what if that was a Yichud situation? She's only one woman in another bomb shelter.
So we saw in Machloikis, if Yichud is rejected for Pikuach Nefesh or not.
No, she's a single woman. She hasn't got Bala baby.
Easier. It's only the Rabbanon. And for Pikuach Nefesh, we see that some opinions say it's rejected. Abu Yisai, can one have Tchias HaMesim when he's alive? Strange question. Let's ask it again. We normally think of Tchias HaMesim after one's demise. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and wakes him up. We're waiting for it. Mitzvah Hashem B'Korov. Can one have Tchias HaMesim when he is alive? He died. Clinical death. He died. He's alive. You see him. He's running in the streets. He's lifting heavy weights. Alive. Tchias HaMesim. Says the Michtav Eliyahu. In Brachos Daf Yud Ches we learn that the Rishaim are called dead men walking. Why? What is life? It's a collection of a lot of minutes. That if you do the right thing, they are eternal minutes. If you don't, they're dead minutes. So a Rasha has a lot of dead minutes. He's a dead man walking. They don't have any kiyum. It doesn't last. So if the Rasha does tshuva, he is a dead man. And now he just had resurrection in the Atchiyas HaMesim. We finish off with the Gemara in Kiddushin Memtes Amud Beis.
Sorry. Does everyone get Atchiyas HaMesim, even a Rasha?
El Rasha that does tshuva basically came out of death into life. He did chesed. The Torah, the Gemara in Brachos Yudches calls a Rasha dead man. He's a dead man walking. Reshaim bechayeihem kruim meisim.
If he hadn't done tshuva, he's still a Rasha.
He's still a Rasha. But if he does tshuva, that will allow him to have Atchiyas HaMesim during his lifetime. You see him, he's alive. But we call him dead. If he does tshuva now, he in essence has Atchiyas HaMesim.
But then he's not a Rasha.
Correct. So how can, but Lemaisa he's alive. You see him walking, but we're calling him a dead person. But Atchiyas HaMesim will allow us to call him alive. So Mimele he had Atchiyas HaMesim when he was around. Like Gemara in Kiddushin Memtes Amud Beis says, a man goes to a woman and says to her, "Hamekadesh es haisha al menas," makes it night. Shani tzadi gamu. Would you like to be my wife? She says, that'll be great. Yeah, tzadi gamu. Yeah. Then we check and we see that he eats shellfish on a Yom Kippur that fell on Shabbos while driving to the beach. He's kind of far from our definition of a tzaddik or a tzaddik gamu, right? Ve'ninsa rasha gamu, says the Gemara, mekudeshes. Why? Shema here, tshuva belibo. Who told you when he said that condition, he didn't do tshuva in his heart? By the way, you see from here, says Abraham Kanievsky, that the mitzvah of tshuva is the easiest mitzvah out there. Because all you need is a hilhul tshuva to move you to the realm of tzaddik gamu. Great. Some ask, why is she mekudeshet? It doesn't work. You're saying maybe he did tshuva. We know now he's a Rasha, a big one. But maybe he did tshuva. So wait a second. In Brachos Lamedaled Amud Beis, on Hedin Tzadites Amud Aleph, we learn who's greater than whom? A Baal Tshuva or a Tzadik? B'makom sheba'alei tshuva oimdim, afilu tzadikim gemurim einam oimdim. So who's greater? A Baal Tshuva is higher than a Tzadik. So in one page before this in the Gemara Kiddushin Memches, we learn that if he fooled the woman to think that he is in a higher level than what he really is, she is not mekudeshes. Meaning, if he told her, I'm a tzaddik gamu, maybe he was, maybe he really was, so she should be mekudeshet. But if we say, he did tshuva, if you tshuva, you're on a higher level than a tzaddik. She thinks you're on a lower level, she only thinks you're a tzaddik, but you're on a Baal tshuva. According to the Gemara, you fooled her. If that's the case, she's not mekudeshes. So why is she mekudeshes?
You fooled her on more.
More, it doesn't work. If hit'ahal l'shevach, he's lemaisa on a higher level than what he told her, sometimes a woman is not going to want it. She wants what was promised to her. I want a tzaddik gamu. I don't want a Baal tshuva. Baal tshuva is a higher level. I don't want a Baal tshuva.
We say someone who goes to Masech, they should say it's the only one.
That's because he's tzanua, but not when he's mekadesh a woman. So why does it work? Why is she mekudeshes? The answer is because he's told her, I'm a tzaddik gamu. Oh, you take pride in your tzidkus. He just lowered himself one notch and he went down from a Baal tshuva, which is a high level, to only a tzaddik gamu. Mimele she's mekudeshes. Mitzvah Shem, we should be zoiche to be complete tzaddikim and complete baalei tshuva. Acheinu kol beis Yisrael nisunim b'tzar ha'u v'shiv ha'omdim ben bayam uben bayabasha amakem yirachem aleihem v'yotzihem מצרה לרווחה מאפילו לאירו משיבוד לגאולה אשתו ועגולו זמן קורי ונוי מר אמן